Hi everyone, I'm Erin Carswell, Foran's VP Exploration, and once again I'm really happy to be here with you today to take you through some of our latest drilling results. Now, we've been quite active over summer, and as you can see from the photo that we're showing here, it's a beautiful time to be out and about exploring. But the results we're going to take you through today are actually from Tesla. And normally we wouldn't be drilling Tesla during the summer period, and there are some reasons for that that I'll go into in the video. But notwithstanding that, we managed to make some fantastic intersections this summer with some really interesting results that I'm looking forward to taking you through. Before we go much further, please press forward on this slide and please read our disclaimers and forward-looking information statements before we go on. All right, so we're going to start now out at the Foran tenement scale, and this is kind of an updated map of our tenement area. We're going to zoom now into the McIlvenna Bay Tesla area. Now, I've been told that kilometre scale bars are no longer in fashion. We have to use Eiffel Towers instead. So you can see now the scale, the way that this mineralisation is shaping up from McIlvenna Bay all the way through the bridge zone up to the end of Tesla. Still open at the end, by the way, but we're looking at kind of 7 Eiffel Towers end to end in the north-south direction there. So the scale here is getting really significant. As most of you will know, McIlvenna Bay is our flagship project. We have the 40 million tonne resource there. We have a lot of activity going on, particularly at the southern end of McIlvenna Bay at the moment where it projects to surface. That's where we've got our portal in. We're doing our decline development. So much activity on site, which is great to see. But excitingly, kind of in parallel to building a mine, we have these mineralized zones that we've discovered in the last couple of years. So Tesla was a 2022 discovery, Bridge Zone 2023. And as you can see, they really do increase the size of the mineralized footprint of this system and hopefully can bring us a lot of future value. We're going to drop down under the ground here, and I'm just going to use the pen to highlight, basically orient you with respect to the mineralized zone. So in blue right now, I am highlighting McIlvenna Bay, and you can see here it projects right up to surface like I was talking about, where all the activity is currently going on. In the middle here is the bridge zone. We only have a handful of holes into the bridge zone at the moment. We're hoping to remedy that this winter. And then, of course, we have the Tesla zone, which is still growing, still interesting, still surprising us all the time with the kinds of intersections that we're getting, as we'll discuss today. One thing I wanted to talk about, though, first, before we get into the results, was drilling angles. So here we're looking kind of towards the north end on with McIlvenna Bay in the front and Tesla sitting there in the back, and those grey shapes are effectively the mineralization shells. And you can see that we've drilled McIlvenna Bay in particular from a very defined angle. And the reason we want to do this is because it's dipping off towards the northeast. We want to collar the holes in the east and drill back towards the west so that we hit it at a perpendicular angle. That's really important to get a representative thickness. We call it true thickness, and you might see that referred to in some of our press releases. And that just gives us the best information, not only for the geology, but for any future resource estimation as well. Now, the issue with Tesla, and I'm going to turn McIlvenna Bay and the bridge zone off here so that I can demonstrate this. Tesla, if you want to drill it from the east back towards the west to get that really good angle, unfortunately, you have to collar that hole in a lake or in a swamp next to a lake. And I'll highlight that. You can kind of see it up here. That's the southern end of Hanson Lake projected up there onto the satellite photo. So unfortunately, what that means is that most of the time for Tesla, we're limited to winter drilling when that lake is frozen or when the swamp is frozen, which really only gives us a solid 2.5 month winter program to punch out as many holes as we can. So what we did this year was we experimented with other ways to drill Tesla, just to allow us to get a bit more coverage throughout the rest of the year. And one way we did that was to trial new directional drilling tools so that we could collar our holes in what we would call the footwall side of Tesla. So that means the rocks that are kind of underneath. We can drill down parallel to it and then kick those holes across into it in order to get those perpendicular intersections that we want and that we need. And you can see here that we were effectively, these are the first 3 drill holes that we've attempted in this program, and they were effectively able to get the kind of intersections that we wanted. So that was a real win. Technology has come a long way with drilling in recent years. We'll zoom in to just have a little bit of a better look at them here. Here we've got copper equivalent values on, and you can see those pale grey hole traces kind of punching through from the back of Tesla, and you can see those intersections sticking through at a different angle. It's also worth pointing out here those large kind of gaps in the drilling that these are filling in. We know that this is a big continuous body of mineralization. However, we still need to understand those internal variations. We need to confirm that it's there, that those grey shapes do hang together, that it all makes sense. And that's when we talk about infill drilling, that's why we're doing that. But it doesn't mean that Tesla can't continue to surprise us. And in fact, all three of these infill holes have been surprising in their own way, in a good way. Zooming back out, just to orient you again with respect to McIlvenna Bay Bridge Zone and those three holes coming in there. Now we'll dive into some results. So first of all, we're actually going to start at the very bottom of these holes. And you can see some fantastic results in here. TS34 hit the main lens, 6.75 meters at 1.6% copper and 4.8% zinc. TS2429 had some really high grade zinc there. You can see 13.6% along with about 0.6 copper. And then TS2430, 3.4 meters at 4.29% copper and 8.21% zinc. So we'd like some more of that stuff, please. Always good to see the high copper in the zinc zones there. It does happen in this part of Tesla. You know, you do get that overlap. We'll swing around and so that I can show you kind of from the underside here. When we go from that main lens, typically we progress into what we would call at McIlvenna Bay, the copper stockwork zone. In these holes, we have it. It's not necessarily all stockwork. We do get some breccia mineralization as well, which can be quite high grade. Again, by the way, TS2430 was released in the previous press release. We just hadn't released a video with that. So that's why we're touching on that here. Like it kind of makes better sense in context with these other two infill holes. But anyway, TS2430, which is the northernmost one of these infill holes, intersected a fantastic intersection of 31.2 meters at 2.4% copper and nearly 0.5% zinc. So that was, again, one of the first hints that we got that this part of Tesla is actually hanging together really well in terms of those great thicker copper zones. TS2429, another really lovely thick intersection. So just over 26 meters at 1.7% copper and over 1% zinc. And then TS2430, and probably the highlight for me, it's not quite as thick, but beautiful grades. We've got 8.4 meters at 2.4% copper, about 1% zinc, and 1.9 grams per ton gold. So that's really significant mineralization. Underlying that, again, was another 22 meters at 1.3% copper, nearly 0.9% zinc, and a bit of gold. So the intersections that we're seeing here are thicker. They're part of central Tesla, particularly towards the southern end of the strike length, actually has some really lovely zones that do seem to hang together really well. But another surprise that came out of TS2434 was repeats of mineralized zones, and they're sitting in the footwall side. And what I'm going to do actually here is kind of draw on the rough projection of the main Tesla lenses. You can see in the blue, they project down something like this, tipping off towards the northeast. So what I'm highlighting here is mineralization that doesn't sit where we would necessarily have expected it. So you can see here that we have 1.7 meters at over 15% zinc and 4.4% copper sitting in the footwall side to Tesla. And then again, further back up into the footwall, we have another 5.5 meters at over 1% copper. Now, what's interesting about this is, you know, we don't typically see that much mineralization in the footwall, but then again, we don't always drill from the footwall side. So there's quite a good chance that had we been, you know, just drilling from the lake, we may not have ever intersected this mineralization at all. So it's a different way of drilling Tesla that may be enabling us to pick this stuff up. It's probably going to make a little bit more sense in terms of how this all hangs together if I can show you some cross sections. So what I've got here, I've actually put those cross sections against the mineralization wireframe so that you can see roughly where they sit. The reason we use cross sections is it's kind of like cutting an orange in half. You get to see the internal makeup of the mineralized zone, and it gives you a much better snapshot, I suppose, of the geology, the way the lenses sit with respect to each other, the way the faults are looking, that kind of thing. So we're going to start, I think, in the north and then work south with these sections. So we'll start with TS2430. This is one of the ones you would have seen in the previous press release. And you can see again, I'll highlight it here so you can see exactly which one I'm talking about. The beautiful directional drill hole coming down beneath my arrow here and hitting a thickened copper zone, almost flat-lying drill hole. This one really cool. And hitting that thickened copper zone in the kind of central part of the lens there. So that was a fantastic hole and gave us lots of really good information. TS2429, same thing again, comes down, hits that thickened zone in the center of the lens. And then TS2434, so we're stepping further to the south here, and this is where things start to get a bit more structurally complex. We have more faults going on here, and faults basically, they can do all sorts of things, but here what we think they're doing is repeating packages of rocks and potentially the mineralization that goes with it. And you can start to see, if you look at the geological legend there, you can start to see some of these rocks that we call the CBMs or the cherty banded metasediment. That's the pale pink layers. They're repeated on the lower side or the footwall side of these faults. And so what that's doing is also giving us the potential to repeat the mineralization. So what you can see, and I'm probably going to use my blue again here to highlight it, TS2434 came down, nicked part of what we think could be a new lens sitting in the footwall and went into a thickened intersection again in the main copper lenses. The other thing I should point out here is that we think that the bridge zone might be yet another parallel lens here. So we didn't, none of the holes here drill deep enough to intersect it. But when we project the bridge zone mineralization, this is our hypothesis at the moment, is that it's going to sit in a stacked system with the main Tesla lenses and with that footwall mineralization that we've identified. I'll point out too that with the footwall lens, and again, I'm using my highlighter here, we did intersect something similar in a hole from last year called TS2311 Wedge 2, and that was sitting about 400 meters down in this direction from where we've hit the latest footwall min down in the bottom there. So there's a 400-meter gap between them. We've interpreted a lens in here. Obviously, we need to test that, but it does open up an area again of more potential to grow Tesla. So super exciting for us. This is why we love drilling Tesla. We get surprises like this all the time. And if we were to model up that lens, and I'm not saying we're going to necessarily show this one like this again, it's just for illustration purposes, that is this lens here. That's the kind of thing it would look like. So you can see the stacked nature of it with respect to the Tesla main lenses on the right there. Now, this is where I'm going to try and explain what might be happening here. So right now we've zoomed back out, and this is really the last kind of underground slide that we're going to look at here. We'll zoom back out and we're looking down on McIlvenna Bay on the right and Tesla with its lower lenses and everything else going on the left there. So I'll draw some faults in here. I think I've shown these before. We know that there's a big fault that comes above McIlvenna Bay called the Coziol fault that strikes a bit like that. We know that there is a parallel fault that we call the Tesla fault. It has a bit of a curve in it and it does something like that. What we now think is that perhaps there is a splay fault that comes off and separates the Tesla main lenses from all these interesting things that are happening in the footwall where we get a lot of complexity. The lower lenses, the new gold lens that we announced, all seems to be happening in that fault wedge just beneath the Tesla main lenses. So some really interesting stuff to figure out here. And I'll just make the point too that McIlvenna Bay is still open in that direction in the red. Bridge zone, obviously we need more drilling here, and in this winter program we'll be stepping that up. It's still open in that direction and potentially that direction too. And of course these interesting footwall things, we don't really know what's going on in these zones either. So the picture is starting to come together with every new hole that we drill. And again, this is what makes it so exciting for us. It's like a puzzle to solve, right? We're treasure hunters out there trying to find mineralization and seeing how this all fits together and how we might find more. It's a fantastically fun kind of part of the process. All right, so we'll zoom back out to the same view that we were looking at before without the Eiffel Towers this time. And I'll just draw now where we're going to be focused this winter. So we've got 8 drill rigs mobilizing in December, which is a bit earlier than usual. Normally we'd get going in January. We're actually going to start some rigs over on the frozen swamp. That's going to freeze earlier than the lake. So we'll be getting some rigs started across there and drilling beautiful big holes into Tesla. We're going to keep that infill and expansion going. What we'll be doing this year is actually using the same directional drilling tools. We'll be drilling big long parent holes and then up to 4 smaller holes off each to make sure we get more bang for our buck for every meter drilled. So we're going to be utilizing the same technologies to really help us get that drilling efficiency up for the winter program. And of course, once the lake ice freezes, we'll be putting drill rigs on the ice as well and getting some more information out of that too. So that is what's going on. We've got a huge program coming up. We can't wait to start announcing results from that in the next few months. But in the meantime, wish us luck, and I will speak to you soon. Thank you so much.